Thank you for coming this afternoon. My name is Steve Porttorff. I'm the Ag and Natural Resource Agent in Carroll County for Virginia Cooperative Extension. I've been an agent since about 2012. I'm a teacher for 25 years before that. So I was asked to talk about food preservation. So that's what we're going to do this morning. A little bit about my background and canning and so on. My mother canned, and she was a child of the Depression, and her mother canned, and my mother canned, so I kind of picked up a lot of things from her. However, when we started canning a lot, I learned quite quickly as little kids why my mother ran us out of the kitchen quite quickly, so all the hot water and so on. So we're going to talk about this morning. I want to talk a lot about water bath canning. We talk some about pressure canning, and then about freezing, so preservation. And there's a lot of other ways to preserve food, but that's what we're going to talk about this morning. But before we start, I just want to do a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, hopefully everybody filled out one of these. This is a self-reporting form that we have to keep track of who our audience is. So I appreciate you filling out these forms if you haven't already done that. So thank you very much. And just leave them on the chair back behind and get those picked up. I'm also going to pass around a form here. This is a registration, I shouldn't say registration, a sign-in form. I guess first of all, I should ask, how many of you have been involved in an extension program before?
Not here, but I have.
But you have somewhere, okay. And I guess the next question is, how many of you know what cooperative extension is? So, yeah, a lot of you do, but a lot of folks don't. So, and we'll talk just a little bit about what extension is. But anyway, I do a newsletter 6 times a year, and I can put you on for our different programs that we have. So if you would, especially your email address, we don't have the funding to do US mail anymore, but if you put email on here, I'll be glad to add you to my list. So if you do email, I know not everybody does. So I'll start right here. Okay, just a little bit about cooperative extension. Virginia Cooperative Extension. We are very fortunate in Virginia that in every county and a lot of cities in Virginia there are extension agents. That is not true nationwide. So we're very, very fortunate. At least I think we are. I'm very biased, but we're very fortunate to have extension. And where extension comes from is, you've ever heard of Virginia Tech before? Okay, everybody's heard of Virginia Tech. That is one of the land-grant universities in Virginia. And this goes clear back to 1862 with the Morrill Act that founded the land-grant universities. And the idea there was that there was a lot of liberal arts or general studies universities that educated the children of the wealthy people, but there wasn't anything for the sons and daughters of the farmers and the merchantmen and so on. So that's why Congress started the land-grant system to educate the sons and daughters basically of farmers and so on. And the two emphases at that time were ag and what we now call family and consumer sciences, for the men and women. Of course, in those days, and a lot of us remember that, it was home ec. So remember that, but now we call it family and consumer sciences. So that was the first mission of the land-grant universities teaching. That's what they started out doing. And then in the 1880s, they started doing ag research, and they the best variety of crops and livestock and so on. And they started that in the 1880s, and then they got all this information the universities had, and they didn't have any way to get it out to the people. So in 1914, they started the Smith-Lever Act, which started cooperative extension. The idea is you're going to extend the university to the people. So my paycheck comes from Virginia Tech, and I'm considered to be faculty at Virginia Tech. So what we do, and I'm faculty, but I'm not in Blacksburg, I'm in Hillsville. And that's what we do, is do programming to extend the university knowledge and information to the people, get it out to the people in the communities. So that's what cooperative extension does. There's basically 4 areas. There's ag and natural resources, which is what I do normally. I've already mentioned family consumer science. There's something called community viability, and all of us know about Crossroads Institute here in Galax. That was actually started as a community viability program through through Extension. And probably the program that everybody in this whole room has seen or heard of is, and it's because it's kids. Anybody know what that program is? 4-H, yeah, everybody knows that. So that's the youth part of Extension is 4-H. So that's just a little bit about Extension. I'm going to do a little commercial here. I'm an agent, and we work out of the Carroll County office. There's a county office in Grayson County. It's funded by Grayson County, and Carroll, of course, is funded by Carroll County. Galax does not fund Extension, okay? So we also do not, I mentioned those 4 different areas. We do not have a family consumer science in either one of agent in either one of those counties. We really, really need one. So if we had a little funding from Galax, maybe we could have some. So you know anybody on the city council in Galax, you might mention that too. And I will tell you also that somebody in Galax has, city of Galax, that has troubles with their yard or their garden or whatever, they either call me to answer that question, or Kevin Sperlin, or the agent over Grayson County. So anyway, that's my commercial. Okay. So, but thank you for coming this morning. Canning is food preservation is something that I won't say I can't say I'm an expert on it, because you know what the definition of an expert is, don't you?
No.
It's somebody who's more than 40 miles from home. So I'm not. So. But I will tell you that my wife and I can a lot. You know, like I said, I started with my mother, and some of my earliest memories of my mom is going to what they used to call EHU, Extension Homemakers Units. As a child, she was a very avid member of the local extension unit that met at the local one-room schoolhouse. And anyway, let's get back there. But anyway, we've done a lot of canning. I've also been through a number of workshops through Virginia Tech and their food safety or food preservation programs. Hopefully everybody got one of these flyers that's on water bath canning, and that's actually put out by Virginia Tech in their food safety programs. Anybody, did you get one of these? So anyway, that's just a little bit of background. There you go, if you don't mind filling out that sheet too. So today, there's a zillion million things that we could go through. I do plan to do a actual hands-on canning workshop in July. Again, if you'll give me your email, I'll send those out to you. It will be at our office in Hillsville, which is in the old grade school building. We have a kitchen upstairs. It's a school kitchen, so we have access to do a lot of stuff. So I asked Tatiana about doing one here, and we're just not really set up to do that here. So we're just going to talk about this evening. So if I would ask, how many of you have done canning before? Yeah, everybody has. Good. A water bath or pressure canning? Water bath. Okay. So we're going to talk a lot about water bath and a little bit about pressure canning. I get a lot of questions on canning, and some of them are quite scary. So when Tatiana asked about this, that's one of the reasons why we decided we would do this. Okay? And I'm very impressed that you guys, it's a beautiful Saturday morning, and you're in here listening to me. So that's very impressive. So having said that, this young lady was talking about, had a canning guide from Auburn University, from, you know what the copyright date on that was?
Well, I don't know, I got it in 1981.
Okay, so it's been around a while.
Oh, yeah.
Been around a while. That doesn't seem that long ago to me, but it is. But anyway, I'm going to pass this around. This is the Bible for canning. Has anybody seen this before? Okay, this is the USDA Home Canning Guide, and this comes from University of Georgia Extension. They're the ones that keep it up to date. I'm going to pass this around, and if you have any questions about canning or a lot of recipes or whatever, it's in here. And all these recipes, there's a lot of canning recipes. I hear about canning recipes even in here. There's a lot of them around, but some of them are not, probably not safe. So this is the guide to go by. This is the guide to go by. Have you seen this? Somebody's seen this? You've seen it?
I have one.
Okay, good. You get a gold star for today. Yeah. So, I use this all the time. So it has a lot of good information from it. Now, where do you get one? Where'd you get yours?
I'm not sure. It was given to me as a gift from my mom.
Oh, your mother loves you, doesn't she? So, there's several places you can get it. All right, on the back of this sheet, that's the website from the University of Georgia to get the canning guide. You can download it there. Now, I know not everybody has a printer or able to download stuff. I know that. So there's a couple other options, okay? But you can download it. If you flip over the back page, Purdue University Extension in Indiana, you can contact them and they will sell you one for like $25.50. I do not know what the shipping cost of it is. Okay, so you get a hard copy, it's a spirebound copy from them. Okay, so that's the another option. Another option is, and I have a number of these that we put together, and very similar to this. I'll pass these around so you can look at it. I have those for sale for $25. We make no profit off of that. That's basically our download, what it costs to print it, and then the binder and the tabs. So if you would like one after we're done, why, I can get you one. I've got a number for sale here. So no pressure, whatever, but I know not everybody has access to a printer and so on. I just want to make that available to you. All right, any questions so far? Okay, so get my notes here so I keep on track here. Basically what I wanted to do is, normally when I do a presentation, I do a PowerPoint. Everybody loves PowerPoint, right? Loves PowerPoint. So anyway, that's why I decided not to do it. Because there's enough stuff here that we need to talk about that we don't need a PowerPoint. So if you want to, like say, everybody's got one of these publications, and this is on boiling water canning, and then there's some other stuff stapled on here too. I will tell you that I didn't print out the one on pressure canning, but there is another publication on pressure canning. If you go to Virginia Cooperative Extension, their website, there's a whole list of publications. We have publications from a lot of different things. Water bath canning, pressure canning, and so on. There's a lot of different ones that you can find, and they're a good guide to go by. So, and again, there's a lot of, we're talking about Auburn Extension, they have a website for publications too, so everybody does. North Carolina has a wonderful extension website with publications on it too, so that we use a lot of them. But anyway, so I'd like to go through this, a little bit of background, and I guess I've heard this story too many times for it to be true. So I'm not going to ask what everybody cans, but the story is this little old lady, somebody's grandma, she canned potatoes. I'm not quite sure how she did it, but you can potatoes. There's a way to do it, but she canned them, but she didn't do it quite right. And so she took those potatoes out. She made potato salad with them, and took it to the church picnic and so on. And unfortunately had botulism in it, and several folks died from it. So again, when we do canning, there is a big responsibility to do things right. And again, the canning guide that's going around, that's why we have those, so that we do things correctly. And again, one of the questions I get, and my wife heard somebody talking about this too, that when you do water bath canning and you hot pack it and you're waiting to put it into the water bath. Sometimes you'll hear it click, you'll hear it seal. And then the lady said, well, I heard it sealed, so I didn't process it because it was already sealed. And I've had people ask me about that before. What's the answer to that one? Yeah, you always want to process it. Always want to process it. Right? Always, always, always. All right, so let's look at this for a minute. Basically what this boils down to is what you can preserve and how you preserve it is based on acid. Okay, there's high acid foods and low acid foods. Okay? High acid foods mean there's lots and lots of acid in it. Okay, what's an example of a high acid food? Okay, that's funny you mentioned tomatoes. That's an interesting case. We've got a whole different category for that one, so we'll talk about those. Okay, so we've got mentioned tomatoes. What's another one that's pretty high acid? Okay, fruits, apples. Okay, so here's peaches. These are Canadian peaches that we canned last year. That's considered to be a high acid. And the cutoff is, and I think I don't know if it's in this one or not, it's 4.6 pH or 4.6. So as you can see here, examples of high acid foods, here's apples, berries, pickled beets, peach, tomatoes. They've got tomatoes on here. And then some low acid foods are, on the other side, are beans and beets and potatoes and so on. So those high acid, the low acid foods below 4.6, those are the ones that need to be pressure canned. Okay, so there's a cutoff. So again, if you have a question about how to process something, refer to that canning guide. And I know Ball Canning has a canning guide that has lots of information in it too. But make sure you process it the way it's spelled out in the guide.
So you said the low acid needs to be pressure canned?
Low acid, right?
Low acid.
Yeah, if it's less than high, in other words, if it's something has a pH of like 6.0, that's more that would need to be pressure canned. Because the high acid stuff, you're okay. If it's got a lot of acid in it, a lot of vinegar, pickles, and so on, because the acid is going to kill any botulism or whatever. And see, the thing about a water bath canner, it only boils. Okay, it only boils. And if you know about, remember your physics, everybody remembers physics, right? So when you pressure can something, you're putting it up, not only do you have heat, but you're putting it under pressure also, and that's what kills the botulism organism. And that's what kills people, the botulism. And unfortunately, botulism, you can't taste it, you can't smell it, or anything, so you don't know it's there. So that's why it's really, 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 really important to process right. All right, so only high acid foods with a pH of 4.6 or less can be processed using water baths. So we mentioned that, okay? Going on to the next page, something else to keep in mind too, that how long you process it when you're doing a water bath depends on the elevation. What's the elevation here?
Almost 3,000.
Yes, almost 3,000 feet. So, and I know that the folks came from North Carolina. If you're at sea level, less than 1,000 feet, you don't have to process it as long. But here, you have to process it a little bit longer. And the guides are in, the numbers are in that canning guide. Okay, so that's the limitations. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about equipment. As a guy, I love equipment, tools. Just love those. So, I don't even know where to start, but I guess we can start with the jars, okay? So, this is a ball jar. This is actually the only type that you should use to can with. Now, my mother, I told you, was a child with depression. She used these. You may know what this was? Mayonnaise jars. So you used to get mayonnaise in glass jars or plastic jars. Now, don't use these, okay? Because you may know why. They can break down. They're thin-walled. They're not as heavy as what the ball jars or the curved jars are. So, so don't use these, even though my mother did. I mean, she had 7 kids trying to economize, but anyway. So you want to be careful with that. Here's another jar. They recognize this. This says this is a mason jar. They recognize this.
Spaghetti?
Yeah, if there's spaghetti sauce in it. Okay, these are not, they're really flashy, but they're not made to can with. So don't use these. It's not recommended to use these cans. Okay?
Why not? Why not?
Why not? Because they're not made to can with. Yeah. Now, having said that, I collect these and use these all the time. All right, but not can with. So my wife says I'm a nut about organization. But anyway, you can get these white lids, screw the lids on, and store stuff in them. You know, dry pasta or whatever. So they can be used. Or even if you open, here's a mayonnaise lid. If you open that jar of peaches or whatever, put them in the refrigerator. I always put a lid on like this too, because when you store these, it's better to take the rings off. Anybody know why? They'll rust. Yeah, they'll rust. Right. So those are some things to think about. Now there's a lot of different types of jars. You know, of course, I showed you the narrow and the wide mouth. What's the difference? Okay, wide size, wide is easier to fill. These are more expensive too. They're more expensive, yeah. So it really doesn't make any difference, whatever you want to do. Jars are more expensive, and then the rings are more, or the flats are more expensive too. And then, of course, these are jars, and of course these are pint jars, the wide mouth and the narrow mouths. So, which ones do you use? Whichever one you have, right? Or whichever one you prefer. You know, we like to put pickles in these because it takes a while to get quarter pickles. Except, yeah. And then of course the jelly jars, which are a half pint. All right. All right. So the rings and the flats. You know, here's the flats. You got the wide mouth and narrow mouth. Where do you get these? Okay, you can get them at Walmart. Online, yes. So I can't recommend anywhere to get these, so I have to go through the list. But yeah, you can get them at Walmart, you can get them at Tractor Supply, you can get them at Rural King, you can get them online. I've never been able to find any of them competitively priced as opposed to Walmart or Rural King. And so anywhere. Yes, ma'am.
Have you had any experience with the reusable lids?
Okay, good question. Very good question. All right. It's highly recommended not to use those. See, once you use these and the seal break the seal, you're not supposed to use them again.
Right, those ones, but there's ones that are specifically made for like 4 or 5 uses.
Right, with the clamps on them and so on. Those, according to the food safety people at Virginia Tech, they say not to use those. That's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, they look cool and everything, and there's all these different ideas, but they're highly recommended not to use them.
Is it because you think that they're not going to seal, or what's the reason not to?
They won't seal correctly. They're not going to seal correctly. That's the idea. It's a food safety thing. And again, if Joelle Eifert were here, that's what she would say. But that's a very good question. And that's, again, I go back to my Bible here. That's what they say in here. That's why we publish this. You know, an extension of all the information we put out is research based. You know, there's a lot of stuff on the internet, right? And it's all true. It's all true. So the stuff that Extension publishes, whether it be canning or feedstuffs or whatever, is based on research, okay? Scientific research. All right, so, so we talked about jars. Let's talk about canners for a minute. This is a we actually had some money left over. So this belongs to the office, and this is actually a brand new canner. Okay, a water bath canner. This will, we talked about quart jars and pint jars. I didn't talk about two quart jars or half-gallon jars. Okay, if you use those, you're gonna have a taller canner than this, because the water bath canning, the jars are supposed to be covered by about, top of the jar is covered by about an inch, and this one's not tall enough to do it. Okay, how many quart jars will this hold? 7. Very good. Very good. Hold 7. Notice it has the rack in the bottom of it. Okay, why is that? Okay, you don't want to touch the bottom. Okay, so you don't want to touch the bottom. That keeps it up off the bottom because you want water to flow underneath the jar, the bottom of the jars. Also, since I mentioned this, what type of stove do you use? What type of stove top do you use for a water bath canner?
Kind of has a old kind of eyes.
Okay, all right, and correct. From what I understand, you may have a glass top stove. Okay, I don't think you're supposed to use those, but you should read in your owner's manual about that. Okay, read in your owner's manual for your stove whether or not you can use a canner on it, because it's a direct contact. But from what I understand, you're not supposed to use the glass top because it'll crack that stove. Okay. All right. So yeah, you can put 7 jars in here. How many quart jars? Pint jars? Yes, 9. It's 9. Okay, so.
Can I ask about jars?
Sure.
What about the 4-ounce jelly jars,
Yeah.
and then the pint and a half? Do you do the same time as you go up? Is that what you do? Like for the pint and a half, you do the same amount of time for the quarts?
I would.
Okay, and for the
I would.
4 ounce,
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah, that brings up a good point, because it doesn't hurt to, it's better to over process than under process. However, if you over process, you might overcook them too. So, speaking of canning, and since you said that, this just popped in my mind. Something else I want to mention. We talk about canning and equipment and so on. A lot of you probably are aware of this, but I wanted to mention this, that Carroll County actually has a cannery. Some of you are probably aware of that. I don't know if anybody ever used it. Yeah, several of you have. Okay, very good. It's located over by the farmer's market, and there's a fee per jar to use it. But they actually pressure can everything. It's not water bath, it's pressure can. So if we have a lot of green beans, we take our green beans over there. So it saves a lot of time, because you can put, I don't know how many jars in one of those big kettles, and they process them for you. So that's another option for it. So I don't have the number for the cannery. Rex Horton's the guy in charge of it. But if you call the administrator's office, they can get a hold of it for you. So that's another option. Okay, very good. All right, just again, I like gadgets and so on. Some things, of course, a funnel for filling. Okay, I got a couple of them here. Something else that always helps too is a jar holder, so you can take the jars out of the hot water, put them in so you don't get hurt. You always need a set of prongs for something or other to pick stuff out. And then this is also to hold on to jars and move jars around when they're hot. I actually at home, I actually don't have one of these. I use one of these all the time, but anyway. Also, it seems like you're always straining something. This needs to be replaced, but you're always straining something. And when you fill the jars, if you just take a ladle here and just dump stuff in, what happens is, like on these peaches, if you just dump the juice and the peaches in there all together, and you pack it in there, and you process it, you may know what's going to happen. Well, you mentioned air pockets, that's good. When you put stuff in, you should poke it down and pack it in so that it removes the air pockets. It's kind of like pouring cement in a column. You work it to get the air pockets out. I'm not talking about comparing cement to peaches. That you get the air pockets out. But if you don't dump a lot of juice in there too in your process, of what's going to happen, and I've seen this at our county fair. What's that? Yeah, it's going to float to the top, and what's down here?
All the water, all the.
Juice, yeah. So again, that's why, especially on tomatoes too, that you get as much fluid out of it as you possibly can before you seal it. Okay, so, and this is another thing I don't have. This is a handy dandy thing to pick the lids up. Out. Yeah, yeah, I don't have one, but that came with the kit. So on these lids, I know I'm jumping around a lot too, but when you get ready to seal the jars, the lids actually should be heated. And I was raised, how much do you heat them? What do you remember? How much to heat them?
5 minutes, 10.
Okay, actually to a boil. Have you ever heard that before?
Yes.
Okay, what they recommend now is that they're hot. You know, they don't have to be boiling, but they should be hot. Okay, that's it. They should be hot. So that's a change. They changed that a few years ago. So again, a little gadget to poke down to take the air pockets out. Something else I want to mention too, and talk about filling jars. I'm really jumping around here. Do you feel clear to the top of the jar?
No.
Okay. What's it called when you leave it at the top?
Head space.
Okay, head space. You guys are good. You guys are good.
What space?
It's called head space. Okay. And then how much head space? It's pins, right? That's a good extension answer. That's a level pins. Yeah, it does depend. Usually it's about a 1/2 inch, and they will say in the guide how much. And also these handy dandy funnels. If you fill it like this, usually it's to the bottom of the neck. Okay, bottom of the neck. And why do you do that?
Expansion.
Okay, expansion, and then because the food, when it gets hot, it will expand, and then you don't want to leave too much head space because that air in there is going to boil out. It's going to come out. So you don't want to leave too much, but you want to leave enough. All right, very good. So I think we talked about gadgets enough.
Well, what happens if you leave too much?
Nothing really.
Nothing.
It'll fill up with juice. It's like this one. There's probably a little bit too much there. It does, but again, you don't want to. You know, this is a lot of work to do this. It's a lot of work, a lot of time. So you want to make sure your jars are full.
If you can, and let's say you don't have enough to fill that last jar, I always just save it and put it in the refrigerator and eat it. But is there any, you don't want to do a 1/2 a jar?
Well, you can.
You can't, so it's not going to cause any, it's not going to explode or anything?
No.
And it'll still seal.
It should seal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I usually try to put everything in a quart jar, and like you said, if I have 1/2 a jar, what do I use? Pint jar. All right, very good. Any other questions before we go on? Yes, ma'am.
Is canning more like this, more nutritional than freezing?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I don't know that I'm going to answer that.
Does anybody else know? I mean,
I'm not a human nutritionist, but probably the freezing is more nutritious because you're not cooking as much.
Right.
Okay, we're gonna talk about freezing a little bit later on.
Okay.
Okay, that brings up a good point too.
I have a question. A friend of mine told me once, and I did it for a while, instead of processing it in a water bath, to heat the jar in the oven while I'm cooking, preparing what I want to put in the jar, and then I put hot stuff into a hot jar and then seal it. What is your opinion about that?
Without processing,
Yes.
you gotta process it. I'll be very adamant about that. And you can ask any food safety expert, they will say you have to process it. You need to process it. That's,
Even like if I did a lot of soups like that, mostly soups. I did not do much with meat, just like soup.
if you're gonna can it, you've gotta process it, either water bath or, either water bath and pressure. Yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
yes, yeah.
I have one question. So if you do your quart jars and then you've got your little pint jar that's left, can you put it in the same pot?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And you process,
Even though the time's different, but.
right, and you process it for the quart jar.
For the, right.
Okay. Now, this young lady brought up a real good point about nutritional value. So, as you can see, this was processed in 2022. How long will this last?
Forever.
It will last forever, okay? It will.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, as long as the seal doesn't.
As long as it's sealed. I was at a farm up by Dougspur several years ago, and these folks from North Carolina had bought it, and they were asking me different things. They took me down into their basement, and down in their basement, there were hundreds of jars of canned food that had been there. It's hard to say how long they had been there. Okay. Now, my next question is, okay, it'll keep forever. Is it still nutritional?
6 months to a year.
What's that?
6 months to a year.
Yeah, that's what they say, up to a year, okay, up to a year. Now, I'll be real honest with you, that, we keep our stuff more than a year, because, you know, this is 2022, we still got a bunch of jars left from 2022. The peach season is almost here, and we'll start canning again. But, yeah, that's always a question that comes up. They're saying the nutritional value goes down after a year.
So it is wise to date your jars.
Yes, okay, that's another good point I was gonna bring up. So this handy dandy kit that I got, you know, for canning supplies and so on, had a whole bunch of labels in it, so you could label all your jars, okay? You shook your head, no, why?
Well, the label's gonna just deteriorate,
Okay.
and if it gets wet, it runs. Even if you use a permanent marker, there's things that make it so that you can't read it anymore, so.
Yeah, I agree. And what we found too, we used to use mailing labels on here, right? Peaches 2022, and then empty the jar and wash the jar, the label didn't come off. You ever had that trouble?
It's a devil to get that off.
Yeah. So that's why we always just put the date on the top. And if you want it, if you can't remember what it is, why what it is. Now, if you're making jellies or jams and you're gonna give them away for gifts, that's a different story. So you put the label on there and give it to your favorite niece that you don't like. Yes, ma'am.
So the rings, they're not reusable.
Okay, good question. The rings, are the rings reusable?
Yes, they
Yes,
are.
they are. Yeah. They are. It's the lids that are not reusable.
The lids are not.
The lids are not reusable.
The lid, which part is the lid? The screw-on part?
No, it's the flap.
Oh, I didn't look at that thing.
How about if I send these around? This is the flap. This is the ring, and I'll send these around. Yeah, I'll send these around, and that's for, those are for wide mouth jars, and then there's some narrow mouth jars too. Okay, very good. You guys are good questions. All right. One thing well, since we're here talking about equipment, let's mention pressure canners just for a minute. And I want to make one more. I'm not supposed to promote anybody or anything, so I mentioned Walmart and all those other places. I need to mention Red Hill General Store out by Hillsville. They have a really, really good supply of pressure canners of parts for pressure canners. Okay. This, of course, this is a pressure canner, and it has a pressure gauge on it. And I was telling some of the folks earlier, as you can see, this is from the 70s and what color?
By the color, you can tell by the color.
Yeah, the color, yeah. So,
Harvest gold.
Harvest gold, yeah. Remember when we used to have a refrigerator and stoves, Harvest gold? So, my aunt and uncle in Indiana gave this to us, but it needed a new pressure gauge, and it also needed a new seal. And so this is right after we moved here, and didn't really know that much, and messing around, looking for it on the internet, and darn if it didn't come up Red Hill and Hillsville. So they have the parts. So if you're looking for pressure canner parts, they probably have them. Yes, they have.
How frequently does a gasket on a pressure canner need to be replaced?
It'll last several years. When they start to get hard and not pliable, and also you can tell if it doesn't seal. Okay. Now, talk about gauges here on the pressure canner. Those gauges need to be accurate, right? And we actually have a pressure canner gauge tester in our office. So if you have a pressure canner and need to have it checked, we'll check it for you. My business card is up on the table, so if you need to come in and do that, just give me a call and we'll schedule a time to come in. But please call close because I'm not always there.
I took mine to Independence yesterday and had it checked.
They've got one too. Yeah. All extension offices do. Even though we don't have FCS agents, somebody is there's trained to use that. So.
What if you have a counter that doesn't have a gauge that is the jingle?
Oh, good question. Good question. To answer that, it's one of these things, right? It's a rocker, okay? It's a weighted gauge, and I've got a couple of these. And if it doesn't have what happens is it doesn't have a gauge, if there's a hole there, it would go on here, the weighted gauge, and it would rock. And again, in the canning guide, it tells you how long it should go, if it's a weighted gauge, how long you should process it.
So you think they're safe as?
Oh, yeah. I don't know that they sell those anymore,
Right.
but in the canning guide, they mention how to do that. A good question. So the way the pressure canner works is, again, it holds the same amount of jars as what the water bath canner is. There's a little plate on the bottom here, so you don't, this is up in my attic, I see dead stink bugs, so I'm not cleaning it up. I hate stink bugs. How do they get in there? People ask me all the time, how do you keep them out? I said, you don't. Anyway, so it'll hold 7 jars, quart jars, or 9 pint jars. You fill it up, you don't have to fill it all the way up to about 1 inch or 2 at the top. You seal it up, and then you put it on, seal it up, then you put it on the stove and turn it on, and then when the steam starts coming out of this little pipe here, you go ahead and put the weight on it, and then the pressure will start building, and then when it gets to the right pressure, you turn the heat down, and this will rock. And eventually, this little pop-up, there's a valve here, will pop up and seal it, and then it'll rock. Then that's how you know you're at the right pressure. So that's
when you start your time.
Yeah, when it reaches the that's a good point. When it reaches whatever pressure you need. Yes, ma'am.
Can you put that one on the glass top?
I doubt it. It's the same process. Again, Reach and Stove manufacture. That brings up a good question about processing times. I apologize for jumping around so much, and I asked this question to our experts. First of all, on a water bath, it says you start your time when it starts to boil. Okay, what's a boil look like? When it bubbles, okay? Now we're talking about a soft boil or a hard rolling boil. Okay, so I asked that question and they said basically when it starts to boil. So even a soft rolling boil will work. Okay? And then you don't want to start your time until that boil stops, because even if when you're canning and you've got the water hot and boiling and you put the jars in, those jars are probably not going to be really completely hot anyway, so it's going to stop the boil. You got to bring it back to the boil before you start going again.
Now, remember, I wanted to know, the electric canner is the same as the water vacuum.
Does it work the same? If you can bring it, if you,
Appears to.
yeah, if you can bring it to a boil, I'd say yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I actually looked in the book after you asked that question, and I didn't see anything about the electric canners. However, I do know that, using the oven, boiling the oven and so on, those don't work. It needs to be in boil.
But when you fill it up with water, so it does come to, and it heats it, it does come to a boil.
Yeah, and the water goes over the top of the jars.
Mhm.
Yeah. You should be.
So you could use that if you have a flat top stove. You can.
Yeah, because you plug it in.
Yeah.
Right, like an electric skillet. That's good.
That's portable.
That's a good question. I will ask our specialists about that. Do a little research, because honestly, I don't know.
Okay. Will the book that we're talking about, the Bible, you said?
Yeah,
Okay, so will the things in there that apply to water vacuuming also apply to the electric? Or do you
They
just don't
should.
know?
They should. The only difference is on that electric boiler, you just give you a different source of heat. Instead of the heat from the stove, you
Right.
plug it in. Okay, plug it in. Very good. Okay, so any questions? I've been really skipping around.
Is that, testing the seal there, the important? Obviously,
Testing the seal?
testing the seal. making
Okay,
sure.
all right. Okay, very good. Let's talk about that for a minute. Yep, that's a good question. So once you fill your jars, and we're not gonna have time to go through the step by step and everything, but just a couple things. That when you fill your jars with hot, if you hot pack them, and then you put the ring on, and something else on the rings here, that this is applies to us guys in the room. But you put the ring on here, and you just put it on snug. You don't have to crank it down. Okay, it's better if you don't crank it down.
Oh, you don't?
Yeah, just put it on snug, don't crank it down. My wife is always getting after me for cranking stuff down. Okay, so we put the ring on, and basically all the ring does is hold the flat in there when you put it in the water, and then you process it forever, how long you're supposed to process. You take it out, and of course you leave the rings on, you set it on a towel, and just let it cool, and hopefully you hear that pop, which means it's sealed, okay? And the experts say to wait, 12 to 24 hours. We usually wait till overnight. And then I always go in and see if I can push on that seal, and if I can't, it's sealed. I think they use a spoon that you can bang on it with the spoon, but you need to make sure it's sealed. If it doesn't seal, what do?
Eat it right away.
Eat it right away. Very good. Something else I didn't mention, also, when you get ready, after you got your peaches or whatever you're putting in your jar, make sure you wipe off the lid, wipe it off really well. Because what happens when you put the flat on, that there might be materials in there that won't let it seal. So make sure you wipe that off really, really carefully. Because it's really, really frustrating to go to all that work and then it didn't seal. The products that you can, just really briefly on that, products that you can, what do you can or where do you get them? If I was getting these peaches or tomatoes or whatever, what do I can do? What do I can't? What type of fruit? What condition should the fruit be in? Good condition, okay. Do you want perfect fruit? Does it have to be perfect? No. Okay, so I probably shouldn't do this, but I am. But we go down to Leonard Orchard down in Cana, and I don't know if you know Bob or not. He's a really nice guy, and that's where we get our peaches. And we get the seconds from him basically. They're not what he sells in the grocery store, but they're wonderful. They can. They might have a bruise or two or a little bit. You cut that off, and they're usually pretty ripe. And then it works better when you're canning stuff if it's right. That way when you put it in the hot water, take it out, put it in cold water, this can slip right off. And the seeds pop right out. So you want stuff that's pretty well ripe, but not overly ripe.
Okay, what happens, I've always heard that if you are canning peaches or some kind of fruit and it's got bruises on it, and then you accidentally leave something that has a bruise and you put it in your jar, will the jar stay good or does it?
If it's sealed, it should stay good.
Okay, I always heard it wouldn't seal if that happened. Same thing with green beans.
As long as it's sealed, as long as they sealed. Yeah. There's lots and lots of stuff we could talk about in the condition of fruit and so on. I got more to talk about, but one thing I want to mention is on tomatoes, because they actually on this publication they talk about gelling stuff, and they also talk about tomatoes. Just some things about tomatoes that I go back about my mother, probably up in heaven. I don't know why I'm talking about her, but anyway, when I first started canning a lot of tomatoes, she had canned a lot of tomatoes, so I was asking her how she did it, and she said, well, I got to where I did can so many tomatoes, and she said that they started spoiling because the acid in the tomato changed. So you guys are talking about heirloom seeds and so on, that there is a difference between the newer hybrid tomatoes and the heirloom seeds. Heirloom tomatoes are how much acid they have in them. So the recommendation is whatever you make in tomato sauce or whole tomatoes or whatever, that, and again in the guide here, they would say to add like 2 tablespoons of like lemon juice, which is an acid, citric acid, to those tomatoes so that will keep them. It increases the acid a little bit so that they'll keep them. That's what they recommend, and I would recommend that too. Tomatoes, again, you can pressure can them, but you can also water bath can them. Again, go by the guide. Something else I wanted to mention too on peaches, that these are really nice and pretty and bright. A lot of times when you're canning, if you don't do something, they start to go through oxidation really quickly and become dark. So the book calls to use citric acid, and lemon is citric acid. It's a type of lemon. So we usually put about a cup in our mix there, and mix it in, and it really preserves the color. That's, if I may say so myself, those look pretty.
A cup of what?
Lemon juice.
Okay.
Lemon juice or lime juice.
Or lime.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because it's all citric acid. It's all citric acid.
Yeah.
Is any citrus fruit citric acid, like would, grapefruit juice do the same thing?
Sure, we use lemon juice because it's the cheapest. So grapefruit probably would work too. And one thing I don't, speaking of that, one thing I don't have here that we use and really need for canning too is a great big stock pot or a great big kettle that you can put the whatever you're getting ready to process and whatever you're getting ready to cook in that kettle. Okay? All right, so wanted to mention the tomatoes, and we're going to talk about sealing. They mentioned in here too about salt and sugar. Do you have to add salt and sugar when you can? No, you don't. Not unless you prefer the taste. Because you talk about salt pork, you preserve with salt, but when you're canning, the process should preserve the flavor and the color, and you don't need to add sugar, pepper, or salt unless you want to. Okay, very good.
If we do the salt, now you've got the canning salt. You didn't always have canning salt, and we just use salt. Is there a reason why we should be using canning salt versus just regular salt?
Okay, when would you use canning salt? That's a good question. That's a very good question.
Anytime it calls for salt, I always use canning salt.
Okay, we pickle beets. Okay, we pickle beets and it calls for canning salt. There is a reason for it, because it's a different consistency, a different content than these regular salt.
Okay, so.
Because I did have heard that, because.
And you don't use iodized salt, correct?
Right, again, that's why it's canning salt, so you can't have iodized. Okay, this publication also has a processing time to it too. And again, it's kind of a very much abridged version of that canning guide. Okay, so just a couple of things on it's really frustrating when something doesn't seal. So when you're talking about troubleshooting, the reason why things don't seal, I mentioned about wiping the lids off. What I didn't mention too is on the jars, you need to, because I love jars, and because you can reuse them, you don't have to throw them away. So I just love that. I hate anything that can't be recycled or reused. But anyway, you need to be really careful that there's no cracks on it or there's no chips in it, because sometimes they get beat around. So make sure you inspect the jars. Otherwise, I have had them, in boiling water bath and they crack and the bottom drops out of it. You had that happen? Yeah, it's a mess. And actually, one of those jars was one of those mayonnaise jars from my mother. So we mentioned pickling. So you can pickle beets, and of course you pickle cucumbers and a lot of different things you can pickle. So we can water bath those, because when you pickle something, what do you add that makes it vinegar, which really adds to the acid. Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions? I know. Yes, sir.
Is there anything that you can't can?
Really, no, there's not. There's really not. And again, in this canning guide, they talk about canning venison and canning meat and so on, but it's all got to be done in pressure can.
You just cannot do it in a water bath, right? Not at all.
To
can any kind of.
No, because it's got to be a pressure canner. Because again, it's physics. Because when water bath only get to 212 degrees, and that kills most organisms, but it will not kill botulism, and that's what causes the food poisoning. So if you use a pressure canning, not only is there heat, but there's the pressure too, and it changes the temperature, because you can get water to boil at room temperature. You can do that if you change the pressure, and that's what you're doing with the pressure canner. So again, in this canning guide, they talk about recipes for canning meat, and there's a lot of folks around that can meat, can venison and so on. The only thing I would say doing that is to be really careful and follow the procedures.
Does the cannery have pressurized?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Yeah. Because a couple of years ago, we had buckets and buckets and buckets and buckets of green beans, and that's after we put the fence up around our garden and we didn't eat green beans. I don't know if anybody has that problem. And so I don't know how many quarts we can, but it was a bunch. And that was so easy. We had them snapped before we took them there. We washed them there, filled the jars, and then put the lids on them and helped her put them in the big vat, and we lifted it up and put them in the pressure canner, and away we went. So that's a commercial for the canner. And I know a lot of churches, they'll actually process their apple butter. It doesn't have to be pressure canned, but it is, because it's just easier for them to do that way. They make it ahead of time, and then they go over there and fill the jars and can them. Okay, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes I'll have a lot to can, like you said, a lot of green beans and things to can, and so on my last batch, I'll only have like 3 or 4 quarts. Is that bad just to put 3 or 4 quarts? Is there a way that it's gonna bust, move around and bust in there?
Because I've done the same thing.
Okay.
I hate to do that because
I know.
it's a waste,
Yeah, but you can do that.
Yeah, as long as You could just do one jar if you wanted to.
How do you keep them from tipping over? Put it in that jar.
But that's what the rack is for. Do yours tip over?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
If there's not enough.
yeah, I've not had that problem.
No.
Yeah.
Cause they're not supposed to tip over, right?
No.
They're supposed to be on.
Yeah.
I guess you could put empty jars in there to
Yeah.
hold them up. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Speaking of that, did you want to say something else?
I was just gonna say about the preparing the jars. Do we have to boil them or can you put them in a hot dishwasher and get them right out?
That's a good question.
That's my easy way.
Yeah, that's,
Hopefully you can.
and I looked this up because I have the same question too. Obviously, you always want to wash your jars, and washer's better, but you're looking at our dishwasher. So if the rule is if you're going to process less than 10 minutes, and some stuff will process less than 10 minutes, it should be boiling water. The jar should be in boiling water. But if you read the guide, that's what it says. And I think even in your handout, that's what it says. Less than 10 minutes processing, you should have it in boiling water. Okay. Speaking of filling jars, okay, so we do a lot of peaches. I love these peaches, in case you couldn't tell. And if you canned peaches before, and we packed all the peaches in, what's going to be left over in that big stock pot after you get all the peaches? Okay, what do you do with that juice? Can yes. Yeah, so you can just like peaches because it's peach juice. And then my wife and I have mixed drinks on Sunday evening. We mix peach juice and peach juice and lemon juice and lime juice. It's really good at mixing drinks. Anyway, the reason why I say that, our FCS agent who was for the area, I was helping her do a canning demonstration one time, and she didn't realize that she could do that. So yeah, but you're right, can. Okay, very good. Any other questions?
Can you can apple juice like that too?
I'm sure you can. Yeah. There's a recipe for it. But yeah.
Will there be an issue with the naturally occurring pectin from apple juice?
You know, I don't know. You have to, for sure I don't. I've not ever canned apple juice. I've done a lot of applesauce, but I don't know. That's a good question to look up in the book. That's a good question. Yes, ma'am.
So with pressure canning, if for some reason your pressure drops down, how long does it have to be down for you to have to start the clock all over again?
If it goes down, you're supposed to.
So like 1 minute down, or less than 1 minute down, you've got to start the clock all over
I wouldn't
again.
say 1 minute, but
Okay.
if you notice it going down for a while, you need to start over.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I want to know what a while. I want to know what a while means.
But if you're
Which little road do I have in that?
Probably not very much.
Okay.
Probably not very much. I don't know how you would know. It'd be pretty hard to measure a minute if it was down. But you know, we were canning something. We lost our electricity. What were we canning? I don't remember, but we lost everything because electricity went off. It was earlier this year, and the electricity went off. We had to throw everything out because I didn't want to open the refrigerator and put it in the refrigerator because we didn't have electricity. So we had to throw it. It was strawberries. Yeah, it really did. It was good compost. All right. We got about 15 minutes left, and I just want to mention freezing for a minute, because we're talking about preservation. And okay, so it's at the end, preserving food, freezing vegetables. This is from things from the University of Georgia, I think. I don't know if it makes any difference. But anyway, how many of you freeze produce? Okay, how do you freeze produce?
Blanch, freeze on a sheet pan, and then put it into a bag.
Okay, so blanch, what is blanch?
Wrapping it in boiling water.
Okay, all right, very good. So why do we blanch?
So
so, go ahead.
It's to preserve the color and the crispness.
Okay, very good. So these green beans, we froze a lot of green beans last year, and we had a lot of peas last year. We have more peas this year. So they are green, nice and green. They're going through respiration. Okay, now we're just the life process. We're going through respiration right now. Plants go through respiration also, and so those green beans are going through respiration. So you have to stop that respiration. So that's the idea. Blanching, you put them in boiling water. And again, this chart will tell you how long to blanch everything. And I don't know, I think they say for a pound it's like a gallon of boiling water. You can look that up. But the idea of blanching is you put it in the boiling water, it stops the respiration of the whatever you're blanching, the corn or the green beans or whatever, and then you take it out immediately and you put it into cold water to cool it down immediately, and then you freeze it. So that's blanching. Yes, ma'am.
When do you start the clock again? Because when you put the veggie in the boiling water again, or like you said before, the boiling will
You start the clock when it starts boiling again. Yeah. So that's why, a gallon of water and a pound of vegetables, that's not very many vegetables and a lot of water. And I'll be honest with you, I don't quite do that, but it takes a while to get that to start boiling again. Okay. So tell us again about the cookie sheet.
Oh, so I like to freeze my vegetables and things on a cookie sheet so that they're not touching each other. And if I just put it straight into a container, then it's all clumped together and it's a lot harder to pull out. I like to freeze whole tomatoes, so it's hard to pull out 3 tomatoes when I have like a bag just clumped all together.
I do the same thing. Blueberries, yeah. Yeah, what I like to do, especially with those big beef eater tomatoes, you slice them like cookies, put them on a cookie sheet, and you freeze them, or get them mostly frozen. Put them in freezer bags and freeze them. Of course, they're not being blanched, but they preserve pretty well.
And then what do you do with them when you get them out? I mean, they're not like a regular tomato.
No, you wouldn't feed them to your.
Right.
Well, maybe you would feed them to your mother-in-law, but you can put them in like a soup or a casserole.
For cooking.
For cooking, yes. You could, I don't know if I'd want to eat them that way, but some people do.
They would lose the most, then they would thaw, all of the juices would just come running out, and it would be kind of spongy and not very good.
Okay, so again, that's really quick on freezing, and also it's the same way too that when you're canning on freezing, you're supposed to leave some head space into the bags that you freeze in, because why? They're going to expand once you freeze. Okay. Anybody freeze corn?
I do.
What?
Freeze corn? How do you do it?
Well, probably, I don't do what you're supposed to, probably, because I just take them, pick the corn, clean, silk it, and shuck it and all that, and then I will just wash it and put it directly into a freezer bag.
So you freeze the whole year?
I freeze the whole year.
Yeah. You might try blanching it. It might keep better. We always do the same thing. We shuck it and put it in hot water, blanch it, and take it out, and then cut the kernels off because we don't have that big a freezer.
No, we don't.
Yeah, it really keeps really well that way. Yes, ma'am.
Is it important or not important to use those bags that you suck the air out, you know what I'm talking about, versus a Ziploc bag when you're freezing?
You should get as much air. We should use a regular freezer bag. It's important to get as much air out of it as you possibly can.
So would it be beneficial to buy one of those little machines that sucks
you're
the
talking about
air out?
vacuum packs?
Yes, that.
Only if you freeze them on the cookie sheets, because otherwise it'll just smush them all up and make them all nasty.
See, that's a whole nother topic about freeze drying or vacuum packing food. That's a whole nother topic.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so talk about corn. You guys know why you shouldn't tell secrets in a cornfield, don't you? You know that one. Too many years. Very good. All right. Any other questions?
Somewhat unrelated, but do you also have a talk about freeze drying?
Freeze drying, topic. I'd have to come up with one.
It's just that was a new one to me on my radar, and it seems a little intimidating. So.
Yeah. I did canning, just, canning's been around forever, and it's, I won't say it's not that hard to do if you know what you're doing, but you get a lot of questions about canning. As I said, to start out with, some of the questions scare me. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this afternoon, and I know all of you do a wonderful job, but I don't want to hear any more stories about the lady that canned the potatoes. Of course, the potatoes were, they're very, very low acid food, high pH. That happens. So very good. It's very scary. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What do you know about steam canning?
Steam canning?
Yeah. So instead of water bathing, you're supposed to be able to use a steam canner for the same amount of time.
I'm not familiar with it, but I don't know. I'd have to do a little research. I'm not going to say you shouldn't do it without doing a little bit of research, but as I recall, it was questionable. So I would have to look that up. I don't know for sure.
Okay. I just bought one, so I haven't used it yet.
Okay. So you can follow the directions.
Yes.
If you have a question, again, my business card is here about it, and then if you'll call me, and I'll talk to extension food safety specialist, and they would know. See, that's the thing about extension agents. We know a little bit about everything, but not much about anything. So that was a joke. Yes, ma'am.
Storing after they're done.
Okay, very good. Okay, that's a good question. So, where are you supposed to store them?
Not in the attic.
Not in the attic.
I
My grandparents,
guess cool and dark.
my grandparents actually took them and put a safe place in the ground underneath the house, and that's how they stored it, and we never had any problems.
So usually most people put them in their basement or cellars. It should be someplace cool and relatively dry. We put ours under the house because it doesn't freeze there. So that's, but if you got place in your pantry or whatever, because if you're putting out 200 jars, that's a lot of room to store stuff. It's a lot of room to store stuff.
So if they're outside, wouldn't they freeze?
No, it's got to be somewhere where it doesn't freeze, but ours are under the house, and it doesn't freeze under our house. We've got a big crawl space where we put them. Okay, very good. I know you've been sitting here almost an hour and a half, and I need to have people sit that long. I appreciate you coming in, and again, if you'd like the canning guide, please let me know, and we'll get you one. Otherwise, anybody have any final questions? Okay, all right. And like I say, they're $25, and I'll get you one. And again, here's my business card if you need to get a hold of me, and appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome. Go ahead. Yeah.
That's how you work.
Can you tell me again, how do you, instead of blanching, you're putting them on, you're blanching them?
Some things I think, some things I don't, it's important. For example,
tomatoes and I'll blanch them. I'll cut them, core them, and put them whole or half onto a cookie sheet, onto a cookie sheet, and I'll marry that in the food.